Since Israel carried out a limited strike against Iran on April 19th, prices of both oil and gold have declined. The consensus on Wall Street is that this is due to receding geopolitical risk in the Middle East. What is the real outlook for geopolitical risk in the Middle East as the summer approaches? Will the resumption of negotiations for a three-way deal between the US, Saudi Arabia, and Israel increase or lower geopolitical risk? And what does the strategic asymmetry between Israel and Hamas have to do with it? Is it time to buy oil? The Gaza war is becoming an asymmetric war, and not because of the ostensible asymmetry in resources at the disposal of the two warring parties. The more important asymmetry is the very different bars that Israel and Hamas are facing to measure success. Both sides know that Hamas has everything to gain, while Israel has everything to lose. This reality has dictated and driven the strategies pursued by the two sides until now, and likely in the crucial weeks ahead. Thus, to make a prediction on the outlook of geopolitical risk in the Middle East in the coming weeks, we need to have a good understanding of this strategic asymmetry. For Hamas, the bar of success in this war is low. Indeed, for Hamas, its very survival is victory. If Hamas can survive the war with its control of Gaza intact, then they will have won the war. This is because the war has boosted Hamas' popularity and legitimacy among Palestinians since October 7th. According to a recent poll conducted by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, 71% of Palestinians support the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th that killed more than 1,000 Israelis. Amazing as it may seem, among the poll's respondents living in Gaza, the support behind the October 7th attack has actually gone up over the past 3 months. This is despite the hardship and the human loss and displacement endured by the Gazans since the start of the war. The only rational explanation is that most Palestinians believe Hamas is winning the war against Israel. Indeed, the same poll found that 56% of Gazans think Hamas will emerge victorious, even though Israel has dismantled 20 of Hamas' 24 brigades and dealt a serious blow to Hamas' military infrastructure. This result supports the view that the bar for Hamas victory is not just low, but very low. 3/4 of Palestinians believe the Hamas attack on Israel has revived the international attention on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. At least 5 European Union countries, including Spain, Ireland, Belgium, Slovenia, and Malta, are now moving towards recognizing Palestinian statehood. Hamas knows that it now only needs to survive the war to reap its political and economic rewards. If it survives, foreign money will pour in to rebuild Gaza, and Hamas will be able to restore and even increase its military capabilities. Hamas leadership also knows that if there is a Palestinian election after the war, Hamas will likely win by a big margin. The same poll shows that support for Hamas is currently twice as high as the support for its arch-rival Fatah, led by Mahmoud Abbas. In case you didn't know, before the war, levels of support for Hamas and for Fatah were similar. Because survival is everything to Hamas, a simple cost-benefit analysis suggests it has no incentive to agree to a ceasefire deal. It will do anything to hold on to its Israeli hostages, whom it views as a guarantee of its survival. For this reason, Hamas will never release the hostages for a temporary ceasefire. It also has a clear incentive to play for time. Hamas knows that the closer is the US election, the greater will be Biden's desire to maintain stability, and thus the greater the pressure he will place on Israel to stop the war. From Hamas' standpoint, the war is already in the 4th quarter, with just 2 more minutes to go. It is leading by 4 points, and it just needs to run out the clock. To ensure victory, it is dragging out the negotiations while playing the victim card to isolate Israel internationally and to slow down the Israeli offensive. For Israel, the bar of victory is very high. Indeed, victory can be achieved only by destroying Hamas. This is because unless Hamas is gone, it will rebuild its strength after the war is over. Israel made the mistake of allowing Hezbollah, an Iranian proxy, to amass 150,000 rockets and missiles on its northern border. It cannot afford to allow Hamas, another Iranian proxy, to do the same on its southern border. Especially not with the advent of the age of the drone in warfare that has leveled the playing fields between technically advanced and less advanced armies. And the discovery of massive piles of weapons and arms in Gaza over the past 6 months makes it very clear that Egypt cannot be trusted to stop the flow of weapons into Gaza. This means Israel will have to take back control of the so-called Philadelphia corridor. It is not an exaggeration to say that the Gaza war is an existential war for Israel, that many Israelis liken to Israel's War of Independence in 1948. Unless Israel destroys Hamas, its long-term security is now seriously at risk. This reality is so obvious to anyone living in Israel, including myself, that a recent poll shows that 82% of Israelis support a military operation in Rafah, where the Hamas leadership is in hiding. The fact that an overwhelming majority of Israelis are prepared to go as far as it takes to make sure the October 7th attack on Israel will not be repeated means the democratically elected Netanyahu government has no other choice but to enter Rafah. The problem is that the Hamas leadership is hiding in tunnels under 1 million civilians in Rafah, and together with 133 Israeli hostages to keep them safe from Israeli raids and bombing. To minimize civilian casualties, Israel has promised to evacuate the civilians in Rafah to the humanitarian zones they have set up in Gaza. But moving 1 million people will be anything but easy, especially given the IDF will need to ensure that Hamas terrorists do not mix in with the civilians and get out undetected. But the process has already started with reports that Israel has already evacuated 150,000 civilians over the past week. What about the opposition from the Biden administration? The November election is only 6 months away, and the violent protests by pro-Palestinian students and activists on American college campuses are further souring the public's perception of Biden's leadership. A new Economist YouGov poll found that only 33% of Americans approve of Biden's foreign policy versus 60% who disapprove. Meanwhile, a Harvard CAPS Harris poll shows that 80% of American voters back Israel in the conflict, and 72% of voters back an Israeli military operation in Rafah to finish the war. My guess is that if Hamas rejects the latest ceasefire offer from Israel that even Anthony Blinken has described as extraordinarily generous, the US will begrudgingly give Israel the final green light to go into Rafah. My further guess is that Hamas will not agree to a temporary ceasefire, and that after a long delay, Israel will be soon entering Rafah in the hope of achieving the victory that has eluded it until now. If Hamas is playing for time, Israel is now running against the clock. Running against the clock because of the possibility that the US might change its mind. Running against the clock also because there are reports that Israeli hostages have been dying in Hamas captivity. And the bar for an Israeli victory is very high. A victory means defeating the remaining 4 Hamas battalions, capturing the Hamas leadership, and minimizing civilian casualties with the world watching. Israel has been preparing for the Rafah operation for many weeks. But we should assume that Hamas has also been getting ready. More importantly, we should also assume that Iran is watching the situation closely. Iran has invested a lot of money, weapons, and training into Hamas. Hamas is an integral part of Iran's ring of fire strategy against Israel. Hamas gives Iran leverage in its dealing with the US. I'm going to assume that Iran will do everything to ensure the survival of Hamas, especially given reports this week that the US and Saudi Arabia are getting closer to signing a deal that includes a defense treaty and normalization of ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Immediately following the October 7 attack, I published a video in which I explained why it was unlikely a coincidence that the attack was carried out at the height of the negotiation of a three-way deal between the US, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Because Iran would be the biggest loser in such a deal, I conjectured that Iran had a big hand in the attack that was designed to sabotage the deal. My view on this has not changed since. Now that the three-way deal is back on the table, I think Iran once again will be under pressure to act. Given that any Saudi-Israeli deal will be contingent on the cessation of the Gaza war, Iran has an incentive to keep the war going for as long as possible. To do that, it will need to lend a helping hand to Hamas to ensure its survival. I don't know if Iran will risk launching another attack on Israel directly from Iran, but I think it's reasonable to think that we will see an intensification of attacks on Israel by Iranian proxies like Hezbollah and the Houthis. Iran might decide that the best chance Hamas has against Israel is if Israel has to fight a war on multiple fronts. An Iraqi satirist politician claimed in an interview this week that Iranian-backed Iraqi militias may resume their attacks on US forces on May 4th or 5th. I think Hamas will not agree to anything other than a permanent ceasefire deal. That is the end of the war. I think the US will soon give the green light to Israel to begin its Rafah operation. I think Iran will threaten a regional war to save Hamas from destruction. Will Iran throw everything it's got into this war? I don't know, but I think it will throw enough into it to scare the oil market into driving prices higher. Given the recent oil sell-off, it seems like the risk-reward of a long position is at least improving.
If you got something out of this program, please hit like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Let me know what you think by posting your comments on the video.
If you want to learn more about my investment strategy, come visit us at davidwunbound.com.